Hey everyone! For my final project, I decided to do a presentation, obviously, on Elizabeth Ann Seton. Elizabeth Ann Seton was the first native-born citizen of the United States to be canonized or to be made a saint by the Catholic Church. There have been only 10 Americans who have been made saints throughout history. She founded the first Catholic girls' school here in America in Emmitsburg, Maryland, and she was the founder of the Sisters of Charity, which was the first congregation of religious sisters in America. This is the most well-known portrait of Elizabeth. Elizabeth was born Elizabeth Ann Bailey in New York City, August 28, 1774. Her parents were well known throughout the community and very affluent, very wealthy. People assume, I think that because of her future, that she was raised Catholic, but she was actually raised in the Episcopal Church. Her mother passed away when she was very young, and her father remarried. Her stepmother had a deep impact on Elizabeth. The new Mrs. Bailey participated in her church's social ministry and often took Elizabeth with her when she went to do her charitable rounds. She visited the poor in their homes and distributed food and other needs to them. When her father and stepmother separated, Elizabeth took it very hard, this loss of a second mother, and she wrote a lot at this time in her journal. And her entries show a love of nature, poetry, music, especially the piano. Her entries frequently included her religious aspirations, as well as favorite passages from her reading. On January 25th, 1794, at the age of 19, Elizabeth married William McGee Seton, and the couple had 5 children: Anna Maria, William, Richard Bailey, Catherine Carleton, and Rebecca Mary. She continued on her stepmother's social ministry, nursing the sick and dying among family, friends, and neighbors. She was influenced by her father to become a charter member of the Society for the Relief of Poor Women with Small Children in 1797, and also served as that organization's treasurer. William Seton suffered from tuberculosis, and the couple decided to move to Italy in hopes that the climate would help his health. And this is where Elizabeth Seton was exposed to the Catholic Church kind of in earnest. When William passed away on December 27, 1803, she ended up staying with family friends, the Felicis, for about 4 months after her passing, and they were ardent Catholics. And she seems very drawn to the Catholic theology of the Eucharist, that idea of real presence, the literal body and blood of Christ, and the transubstantiation, the transformation of the Eucharist elements during the consecration. She returned to New York with her children and some extended family that had come to live with them, and to help support her family, as many widows did at that time, she began to work in schools, working with children in education. She became a member of the Catholic Church officially March 14, 1805, by the Reverend Matthew O'Brien, who was the pastor of St. Peter's Roman Catholic Church in New York City, which was the only Catholic church in New York at that time. Mark Knoll includes Elizabeth Seton in his discussion of outcasts, and rightly so. At this time, Catholics in America were certainly the minority, and I think this is what makes her conversion more notable than it probably would have been in other circumstances. Elizabeth Ann Seton moved her family to Maryland, which had a greater population of Catholics and was much more Catholic friendly. At that time, Maryland's population of Catholics was about 16,000 to New York's 1,500. Elizabeth Seton received the sacrament of confirmation from the Bishop of Baltimore, John Carroll, which was the only Catholic bishop in America. And because of her conversion, she began to have some troubles at work. A lot of children parents did not want their children exposed to her new religious ideas. So, at the invitation of the Archbishop, she established a Catholic girls' school in Baltimore, Maryland, which kind of established that whole parochial system here in America. And to help run these schools, at least in part, she ended up founding the Sisters of Charity in 1809. Her eldest daughter, Anna Maria, actually joined the Sisters of Charity, and even though she wasn't quite old enough, was allowed to take her full vows on her deathbed. 18 Sisters of Charity, including Elizabeth, made private annual vows of poverty, chastity, obedience, and service to the poor for the first time on July 19, 1813. After they made their vows annually on March 25th. Some of my favorite quotes by Elizabeth Ann Seton are, "How sweet the presence of Jesus to the longing, harassed soul. It is instant peace and balm to every wound. Faith lifts the soul, hope supports it, experience says it must, and love says let it be. The gate of heaven is very low, only the humble may enter it." Elizabeth Seton died January 4th, 1821, at the age of 46. Today her remains are entombed at the National Shrine of St. Elizabeth Ann Seton in Emmitsburg, Maryland. Elizabeth Ann Seton was venerated December 18th, 1959 by Pope John XXIII and was beatified by him March 17th, 1963. This gave her the title of Blessed. The Pope said on that occasion, "In a house that was very small, but with ample space for charity, she sowed a seed in America, which by divine grace grew into a large tree." Now, the criteria for sainthood involves 3 miracles that are required to be credited to the individual. So when the idea of her canonization began to be thrown around, the church began an investigation into any such events. The first one involves a nun. She was a member of the Sisters of Charity, and she developed pancreatic cancer. Her fellow sisters prayed for her health and recovery. They prayed to their founder, Elizabeth Ann Seton, to intercede with God on her behalf and for her health. She did recover from this, and on her death 7 years later from a pulmonary embolism, her pancreas was completely clean and there was no evidence of a tumor anywhere within her body. The second miracle involves a young child. She was being treated for leukemia by the Sisters of Charity and was laying on the stone slab that covered Elizabeth Seton's grave. And again, they prayed to Elizabeth to intercede with God for the child, for her health, and for her recovery. And the child did recover, and she remained in remission for about 6 years. The third miracle involves an older gentleman. He was a construction worker and a Lutheran, but he ended up being taken to a Catholic hospital when he became ill. There, he was diagnosed with rubella meningoencephalitis, and was only predicted to live for an hour or so. But local Sisters of Charity, again, prayed to their founder, Elizabeth Seton, to intercede with God for his health and his recovery. And he did recover, and actually ended up converting to Catholicism after this experience. Elizabeth Seton was canonized by Pope Paul VI on September 14th, 1975, in a ceremony at St. Peter's Square. This, of course, gave her the title of a saint. Her feast day is January 4th. Elizabeth Seton is the patron saint of in-law problems, against the death of children, apostleship of the sea, people ridiculed for their piety, widows, death of parents, and opposition to church authorities. She is the patron saint of the Diocese of Shreveport, Louisiana. I'm going to close with the words Pope Paul VI spoke on her canonization. Elizabeth Ann Seton is a saint, St. Elizabeth Ann Seton is an American. All of us say this with special joy, and with the intention of honoring that land and that nation, which she sprang forth as the first flower in the calendar of saints. Elizabeth Ann Seton was wholly American. Rejoice for your glorious daughter. Be proud of her, and know how to preserve her fateful heritage. Thank you, guys. I've really enjoyed getting to know you guys throughout this course through your discussions. I hope you guys have a wonderful Christmas.